Nearly 30 years without answer. The Morgan Nick disappearance case. There was no scream, no desperate chase through the darkness, no witness who could point investigators toward the person responsible. One moment, 6-year-old Morgan Chanutel Nick was laughing with friends at a Little League baseball field in Alma, Arkansas. Just minutes later, she was gone. For nearly 3 decades, that summer night has haunted an entire community. Parents still remember where they were when they first saw Morgan's smiling face on television. Investigators still revisit the same evidence, hoping that one overlooked detail might finally answer the question that has echoed since June 9, 1995. What happened to Morgan Nick? Unlike many missing child cases, this one never faded into obscurity. The search continued. Tips poured in. Thousands of leads were investigated. A suspect vehicle was identified. DNA evidence was collected. Years later, investigators announced a person of interest. Yet despite all of those developments, Morgan has never been found. Her disappearance remains one of America's most heartbreaking unsolved child abduction cases. Before we go further, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Someone watching might live near where this case went cold. That person might remember something. On the evening of June 9, 1995, Alma was preparing for another ordinary summer weekend. Families gathered at the Alma Little League ballpark. Children chased one another between the baseball fields. Parents talked from the bleachers while games continued under the evening lights. Among those children was 6-year-old Morgan Chanutel Nick. She had spent the evening with her mother, Colleen Nick, and several family members watching baseball games. Morgan was energetic, friendly. Like many children her age, she enjoyed playing while the adults watched the game. As the evening progressed, Morgan asked permission to play nearby with 2 other girls. Her mother agreed. The girls wandered only a short distance from the field to catch lightning bugs near the concession area. It seemed perfectly safe. Families surrounded them. Children were everywhere. Nothing about the evening suggested danger, but according to the other girls, they noticed a man standing nearby. He appeared to be watching them. Later, they said he spoke briefly to them before walking away. At the time, nothing seemed unusual enough to alarm anyone. A few minutes later, the girls began walking back toward the baseball field. Morgan was slightly behind them. When the other 2 children turned around, she wasn't there anymore. At first, they assumed she had simply wandered somewhere else, but within minutes, panic spread across the ballpark. Parents searched the parking lot. Volunteers checked nearby roads. Announcements were made over loudspeakers. Police were called almost immediately. The search that began that night has never truly ended. Now that you know who Morgan was, does she remind you of someone in your own family? Tell me in the comments. Keeping her memory human keeps this case alive. As darkness settled over Alma that Friday evening, the baseball games continued. Players remained on the field. Parents stayed in the stands. But the atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as an ordinary summer night had become every parent's worst nightmare. Police officers arrived within minutes of the emergency call. They immediately treated Morgan's disappearance as a possible abduction. Officers searched every corner of the ballpark, bathrooms, storage buildings, nearby wooded areas, drainage ditches. Vehicles leaving the parking lot were observed, and officers began gathering statements from everyone who had been present. Time was critical. Investigators understood that the first few hours after a child disappears often determine whether that child is found safely. Volunteers from across the community joined law enforcement through the night. Flashlights swept across fields and wooded areas. Search teams walked shoulder to shoulder. Helicopters searched from above as daylight approached. Tracking dogs were brought to the area. Divers checked nearby bodies of water. Despite an enormous effort, there was no trace of Morgan. Investigators soon focused on the statements given by the 2 girls who had been playing with her. Both described seeing an unfamiliar man near the area where they had been catching lightning bugs. According to their accounts, he had spoken briefly to them before walking away. Neither child reported seeing Morgan actually being taken, but their description became one of the investigation's earliest and most important leads. Another witness reported seeing a man carrying a little girl toward a red pickup truck near the time Morgan disappeared. Investigators worked to determine whether that sighting was connected to the case. Based on witness statements, law enforcement released descriptions of a possible suspect vehicle. Over time, investigators refined that information, identifying it as a dull red pickup truck with a white camper shell. The truck quickly became one of the most recognizable pieces of evidence in the investigation. Photographs and sketches were distributed across Arkansas and beyond. Thousands of tips followed. Each one had to be investigated. As news of Morgan's disappearance spread nationwide, media coverage intensified. Television stations interrupted programming. Newspapers placed her photograph on their front pages. Her smiling school portrait became known across America. For Morgan's mother, Colleen Nick, every interview carried a single hope, that someone, somewhere, had seen something important. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. The search expanded far beyond Arkansas. The FBI joined state and local investigators. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children helped distribute Morgan's information nationwide. Leads arrived from nearly every state. Some seemed promising, others ended quickly. None led investigators to Morgan. The lack of physical evidence made the case extraordinarily difficult. Without knowing exactly what happened after Morgan disappeared, investigators had to rely heavily on witness statements, forensic examination of the area, and public tips. Every reported sighting was carefully evaluated. Every possible suspect was examined. Every lead was documented. Yet the central question remained unanswered. Where was Morgan Nick? As the first anniversary approached, the investigation showed no signs of slowing. Detectives continued reviewing evidence, hoping that fresh eyes might notice something overlooked. But instead of growing simpler, the case became one of Arkansas's most enduring mysteries. Investigators had witnessed descriptions of both a suspicious man and a pickup truck, yet the trail still went cold. Based on the evidence so far, what do you think investigators were missing? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. For years, investigators refused to accept that Morgan Nick's case had reached a dead end. Although there had been no confirmed sightings after the night she disappeared, the investigation never officially went cold. Case files continued to grow. New detectives reviewed old interviews. Physical evidence collected in 1995 was carefully preserved, even as forensic science advanced far beyond what had been available when Morgan vanished. For Morgan's family, every phone call carried the possibility of hope. Every new lead meant revisiting the same questions they had lived with since that June evening. Colleen Nick became one of the nation's strongest advocates for missing children. Rather than stepping away from public life, she dedicated herself to helping other families facing similar tragedies. In 1996, she founded the Morgan Nick Foundation, an organization focused on child safety education, search assistance, and support for families of missing children. While she continued advocating for others, she never stopped searching for her own daughter. Her message remained consistent through every interview. Someone knows what happened to Morgan. Someone has the missing piece. Investigators believed the same. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, they revisited witness statements repeatedly. The description of the man seen near the girls remained important. So did the reports concerning the red pickup truck with the white camper shell. As technology improved, investigators were able to re-examine evidence collected years earlier using more advanced forensic methods. The FBI and Arkansas State Police continued working together, reviewing the case alongside local investigators. Several persons of interest were examined over the years. However, law enforcement was careful not to publicly accuse anyone without sufficient evidence. Following the principles of a criminal investigation, detectives distinguished between individuals they wished to question and suspects who could be formally charged. In Morgan's case, no one was charged in connection with her disappearance. That distinction mattered. It reflected the investigators' commitment to building a case based on evidence rather than speculation. As the years passed, age-progressed images of Morgan were released to the public. These digitally created photographs showed what she might look like as a teenager, and later, as an adult. Although many people recognized the images, no confirmed sightings resulted. Still, the updates served another purpose. They reminded the public that Morgan's case remained active. She had not been forgotten. By the 2010s, new forensic techniques were changing investigations across the country. Cases once thought unsolvable were being reopened through advances in DNA analysis. Investigators handling Morgan's disappearance carefully re-evaluated physical evidence retained from 1995. According to Arkansas State Police, forensic testing continued whenever new technology became available. One of the most significant developments came decades after Morgan disappeared. In 2021, investigators publicly announced that they had identified a person of interest connected to the case. The announcement followed years of investigative work involving evidence from the original investigation and additional forensic analysis. Authorities identified the individual as Billy Jack Lynx, a man who had died in 2000. Investigators emphasized an important point. Lynx was not charged with Morgan's disappearance. Because he had died years earlier, no criminal proceedings could occur. Law enforcement described him only as a person of interest based on evidence developed during the investigation. According to investigators, Lynx owned a vehicle that closely resembled the pickup truck described by witnesses in 1995. They also announced that DNA evidence had played an important role in advancing the investigation. However, officials did not state that the DNA alone proved Lynx abducted Morgan. Instead, they explained that the case remained open and that additional information from the public was still needed. That distinction is critical. Investigators continue to seek evidence that can establish exactly what happened to Morgan and where she may be. Despite the passage of nearly 30 years, Arkansas State Police have repeatedly stated that the investigation remains active. Search warrants have been executed. Evidence continues to be reviewed. Tips are still accepted. The hope is that advances in forensic science, or someone finally deciding to speak, could provide the answers Morgan's family has waited decades to hear. For nearly 30 years, Morgan's family has lived with unanswered questions while investigators continued searching for evidence. If you've ever waited years for answers or justice in your own life, your story matters too. Thank you for remembering Morgan with us. There is one final chapter to this story. It isn't a chapter filled with certainty. It isn't the dramatic ending many hoped for. Instead, it is the chapter that explains why investigators still believe Morgan's case can be solved. We're about to reach the most recent developments in the investigation. Before we continue, what do you think has kept this case alive for nearly 3 decades? Was it forensic science, determined investigators, or the public's refusal to forget Morgan? The most recent developments in the Morgan Nick investigation demonstrate something investigators often repeat in long unsolved cases. Time can hide evidence, but time can also reveal it. For nearly 30 years, Arkansas State Police, the FBI, local investigators, and Morgan's family have continued searching for answers. What makes Morgan's case unusual is that it never truly disappeared from public attention. Every anniversary brought renewed media coverage. Every new lead generated additional tips. Every advance in forensic science created another opportunity. Investigators continued preserving evidence from 1995 because they understood something important. Technology changes, evidence remains. That principle has solved countless cold cases across the United States. DNA techniques that were impossible in the 1990s now help investigators identify suspects decades later. Digital imaging can improve old photographs. Databases have expanded. Forensic genealogy has transformed investigations in many jurisdictions. Because of these developments, detectives reviewing Morgan's case have repeatedly emphasized that no evidence should ever be considered too old. The public announcement concerning Billy Jack Lynx in 2021 marked one of the most significant updates in the investigation's history. According to investigators, evidence linked Lynx more closely to the case than had previously been understood. Authorities revealed that he owned a vehicle resembling the truck described by witnesses. They also stated that new forensic work had contributed to identifying him as a person of interest. Still, investigators remained careful. Lynx was never charged. No court ever examined evidence against him. And because Morgan has never been found, critical questions remain unanswered. Law enforcement has consistently stated that additional information is needed. Did someone see something in 1995 that seemed unimportant at the time? Did someone know Billy Jack Lynx and observe behavior that now appears significant? Did a memory dismissed years ago suddenly become relevant? Investigators believe these questions still matter, because many cold cases are solved not by a single dramatic discovery, but by small pieces of information finally fitting together. For Colleen Nick, the passage of time has never changed the central mission. Find Morgan, bring answers. Help other families avoid the same pain. Through the Morgan Nick Foundation, she transformed personal loss into public service. The organization has educated countless families about child safety, supported search efforts, and assisted law enforcement. In many ways, Morgan's legacy extends far beyond the investigation itself. Her story changed conversations about child protection across Arkansas and throughout the country. Children learned safety lessons because of Morgan. Parents became more aware because of Morgan. Organizations helping missing children grew stronger because of Morgan. That legacy matters. Because behind every case file is a person, a child, a family, a future interrupted. As the years passed, age progression images continued, showing what Morgan might look like today. An adult, perhaps with children of her own, perhaps living a life no one could have imagined in 1995. Those images are not predictions. They are reminders. Reminders that investigators continue searching. Reminders that missing children are not statistics. And reminders that families never stop hoping. Today, Morgan Nick remains officially listed as missing. The investigation remains active. Arkansas State Police continue accepting information from the public. The FBI continues supporting investigative efforts. And every new advancement in forensic science creates another possibility. Perhaps the answer already exists in evidence waiting to be re-examined. Perhaps someone has held a secret for decades. Perhaps one memory, one conversation, or one decision to speak will finally provide what investigators have searched for since that summer night in Alma. For nearly 30 years, Morgan's name has represented unanswered questions. But it has also represented determination. A family's determination not to give up. An investigator's determination to continue searching. And a community's determination to remember. Because cases are only truly forgotten when people stop asking questions. And in Morgan's case, the questions remain. If you have information regarding the disappearance of Morgan Chanutel Nick, investigators ask that you contact the Arkansas State Police or the FBI. Every piece of information matters. Every memory matters. Every case deserves an answer. Every family deserves the truth. If you appreciate respectful, research-based true crime documentaries that honor victims and focus on verified facts, consider subscribing to The Silence Evidence.